Welcome to the
back
podcast.
to the podcast.
Welcome to the Visceral Voice Podcast. Welcome to the Visceral Voice Podcast. I'm your host, Christine Schneider. Through this podcast, I aim to bring you the most current, up-to-date research on voice science, function, pain science, movement, and everything in between. I am on a quest to learn everything I can about the living, breathing body and its intricate connection to the voice. This podcast documents the continuation of my learning and my experience as a professional singer, a nutritional consultant, a movement specialist, and a manual therapist. Join us as we strive to provide current, knowledgeable, creative, and compassionate information to help you restore, regain, and create happiness and success on your vocal journey. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I am so thrilled to be joined by Alie B, Gorrie today. I actually asked Alie to come on the podcast like years ago, and then the pandemic happened and all this craziness. And so I was so thrilled to be able to see her when she was in New York City and hang out with her a little bit and say, hey, can we do this podcast interview? And I'm so grateful that she said yes. So Alie B. Gorrie is an actor, arts educator, and disability inclusion inclusion advocate. I'm going to pause, start over. Alie B. Gorrie is an actor, arts educator, and disability inclusion advocate based in Birmingham, Alabama. She's performed in New York City and across the country on national tours, and she's currently bringing her solo show, Cockeyed Optimist, to theaters across the Southeast. Please check that out because it sounds amazing. She is the founder of Songs for Sight, an organization serving children with low vision across Alabama. She holds a BFA in musical theater from Belmont University and an MA in arts in medicine from the University of Florida. Alie B is a tap and musical theater educator at organizations across the country. She is a professor of theater at Samford University. Awesome, Alie, thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm so happy to be with you.
I would love to start by just letting the listeners know a little bit about you, a little about your journey as a performer, as an advocate, and as with your work now in arts and health.
Yeah. Wow. I'm just so thrilled to share this time. I am Alie B, and I grew up performing. I started auditioning for shows when I was around 6 years old. So the bug bit me really early, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I tried to mimic like Ethel Merman in the kitchen, growing up. I was like, this is everything. And theater was all I knew and all I pursued for a really long time, still going. But I also was born with a rare eye disease and have an eye condition called optic nerve hypoplasia, which means my optic nerves are really, really tiny. And they told my parents, your kid might be blind or she might be able to see an M&M from across the street. We have no idea. Good luck. And I grew up with amazing education and support and a great eye hospital and great medical care. But I was always the only kid with a disability in any creative space that I was in. I was always having to do a little bit of extra work in terms of, I can't just walk into a room and learn a dance combination. I have to walk into the room, have a talk with the choreographer, tell them that I can't switch lines. And not that I say that and it feels shameful. At the time it did. It felt like the last thing a 9 or 10 or 11-year-old kid wants to do is say, hey, I'm different and here's how I need help. You just want to be like every other kid, And so I was always in that world, but also always pursuing theater as much as I could, and going off to summer programs and places like, I mean, I was an Interlochen kid, and loved learning and leaving the South, and going to intensives and anything I could. And went and pursued musical theater in undergrad, and got to New York and realized that I had a lot more advocacy I had to do in rooms that I wasn't necessarily prepared for. And the industry, which our industry in theater, prides themselves on being a safe and welcoming and inclusive space. And yet I would be in these callbacks or auditions and have to ask for things like my materials in a larger font. And they would say, well, why can't you just go down to the store and do it? And I was like, wait a minute. Like, I thought we were, you all wanted me to succeed behind the table. What's happening, Or I would tell choreographers, hey, I'm so excited to be here with you. When you're teaching the combination, I need to stand directly to your left, and I won't switch lines. I have a vision impairment. I can only really see out of one eye. And the choreographer, I mean, true conversations were had, like, well, if you can't see, then why are you in here? Like, why, like, how can you dance if you can't see? And there was just such a lack of knowledge and understanding. And I also, in my upbringing, grew up advocating for other kids with eye disease and low vision. And that was a big part of my identity, and learned to advocate at a young age, and started a nonprofit at a young age because I wanted to meet other kids like me, basically, and have community. And I had those advocacy skills, but didn't expect I'd have to use them every single day. And so it really, especially being in New York, fueled my advocate part even more. I ended up connecting to the greater disability community and got to do shows that were with an all disabled cast. And I thought that was so unique. And there was a collective sense of identity that I had never had because I'd always been the only one. And that really motivated me. But also, the more my disability community grew, the more my eyes were opened. I hate saying things like that, but the more my eyes were open to the injustices in New York City, in the world around us, in terms of access and inclusion and ability for folks to experience life to the fullest. So it really fueled that advocate part of me even more. And yeah, so that's a huge part of the work that I do now, is working with theaters and arts organizations at how to build more accessible practices and ways of doing. And then COVID happened, so that stalled my New York life and brought me back to the South, where I'm from. Said I would never return here. But what happened was I got down to Birmingham and I realized, oh my gosh, no one is doing this work. And do I need to be in a place where I am yelling into a void of other people yelling into the same void, or where people are actually interested and want to change? What I found when I came here is so many folks were just so curious. They said, oh, we had no idea. Like, we don't know how to even have this conversation. Can you help? In the South, there's so much like wanting to be polite and kind and sweet and to a fault, I think, because we're too scared to have harder conversations, or just conversations that challenge what we know and what we don't know. And the disability world and the arts world, I felt needed more connectivity here, which is why I'm still here. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And then you also, during COVID, got your master's.
Yes. Best time to go back to school is in a pandemic. I would go back to school for the rest of my life if I could.
I would join you.
Let's do it. We've got to find that kind of scholarship. But yeah, I knew the interesting thing is, I rarely share this when I share about my own journey, but because of my connection to the eye care and low vision community here and my theater background, I actually undergrad thought I was going to do music therapy and then ended up going the musical theater route. But I always knew in the back of my brain that I would bring the arts to people who need it and might not be able to access it, for a variety of reasons, but also use the arts in a healing capacity. I didn't know what that would look like, but I knew how healing the arts were for me and what a safe, healthy, nurturing space they created for me. And I wanted to let others know, and maybe others who might not get the access in their day-to-day life, that arts were safe and amazing for them too. So I had this amazing conversation with a woman in Birmingham at the big teaching hospital where I received all my care growing up. And they actually had an arts and health or arts and medicine program. And I was so curious because I knew about music therapy, drama therapy, art therapy, but this field of arts and health and arts and medicine was something I hadn't explored yet. And so I had a meeting to ask all of my questions. And I learned that there was this other field. And in the arts and health world, we are using art, poetry, music, dance, not necessarily to help you process your traumas or the hardest things that have ever happened to you. There are amazing creative arts therapists that can do that, right? That's when you can go to your music therapist, your drama therapist, your art therapist. But artists in residence, which is what we call practitioners of arts and health, our goal is to bring the arts to folks that may not get them otherwise, to just remind you of who you are at your core, our shared humanity. And that when we get to bring art to a hospital or a mental health care facility, we are truly using the arts just to remind you that, like, you're so much more than your diagnosis. You are a complete whole person. And this place that you may be in is not, you don't have to be confined as you think you are, and we really, as artists in residence, are just using the arts to bring folks back to themselves and who they are at their core.
So important. And I just love so much that so much more than your diagnosis. I just think that's so important in all of the work that any of us therapists do, is to help people know that they are so much more than whatever they've been diagnosed with. So I'd love to kind of come back to the theater for a little bit.
Sure.
How do you see the current state of accessibility in theater, both on the stage, behind the scenes, and then for the general public who might have accessibility, disability, being able to come in and be a patron?
It's such a good question. And it points to this thing that I always talk about when I share about inclusion in the arts, which I like to call 360-degree inclusion, right? Which we're not just focusing on the patrons. We're not just focusing on the physical space. We're not just focusing on artists, but it's really, how do we look in all of these different areas and do 1% better, And I think for artists and for like the theater industry, the professional theater industry, we have made such huge strides. You look at shows like How to Dance in Ohio. You look at shows like, there's a lot of beautiful, even in our town right now, on Broadway, we have some great disability representation. What is beautiful is we see this, but it doesn't feel very connected. It's like, oh, maybe once a season you get some great representation here. And it doesn't quite feel like disability is in the fabric of the Broadway performance world. Like it's a very special thing that sometimes happens, and that is a little bummer, or a large bummer, actually. But it doesn't feel necessarily like, oh, this is building, this is building, this is building. It's like, we got this amazing thing with How to Dance in Ohio, and then the show closed, and then what now? And we see it in a lot of different areas. And of course, there are amazing theaters all over the country that are disabled or disability-focused theater companies, and they're doing amazing work. But what I want to see is more folks with disabilities working in regional theater, working in Broadway theater. And it just feels like there are still some pipeline issues that we are actively working to solve. I think in the education realm, there are a handful of disabled folks who have worked professionally that we are all very committed to training the next generation of disabled artists, because quite frankly, so many disabled artists get denied training because it's not, think about actor training. You're not always at a university, right? The amount of film and television acting classes I have been either let go from or told it's not for me because I can't see the camera. I mean, I've been told really hurtful things from arts educators about what I am capable of, and without these folks even knowing me. And my disability is I have low vision. I'm legally blind, but there have been times when I'm with people and they have no idea I even have a disability, So I'm like, if you're not letting me into your classroom, oh my goodness, like, come on. So there's a big issue. And I think with the casting world too, I work a lot now with casting directors, and they'll say, hey, who can you send us for this project? In terms of actors who have similar disabilities to me, or just disabled actors of all kinds. And for a while they were saying, yeah, we just couldn't find anyone. And I'm like, you guys, 25% of our world is disabled. I'm sure you can find someone. You have to have patience, and you have to look at the systems in place that have historically not allowed disabled artists the ability to take up space. And so that's a huge issue there are many of us who are actively like building our own pipelines to try and train the next generation, but it's not a quick fix. It's a commitment. And I think our industry can commit to it for like little bits of time, but I need to see the long haul commitment, and it's just not quite there.
And you've worked with some theaters, I know, in the past of maybe wheelchair accessibility and just various things to enhance the theater experience for more accessibility. And can you share some other examples of how theaters that you know of have successfully created a more inclusive environment for both the performers and the audiences?
Yeah. So what was really special about coming home during COVID is one of our bigger regional theaters here in Birmingham was building a new arts campus. And we got to design the whole building so that there is like, you can navigate the entire thing, the education wing, the shops, the backstage, the stage, the admin offices, to where someone who's a wheelchair user never has to see one stair. Like you can get into any level of the theater, right? It's about accessible seating. It's normally in one specific spot and you don't have a choice. And it's only for wheelchair users, which is beautiful, but also what about every other disability that might need a different kind of seating arrangement, So there have been in this theater in particular, I love it because if you use a wheelchair, any kind of mobility aid, you can see the show from many different vantage points, which is lovely. Also, there has to be a commitment to building your audience of disabled theater goers. And some success I've had with various arts orgs is setting like the first Sunday of the month is always when we have the interpreter. And they're like, well, Alie B, the deaf community wasn't coming for a while. And I said, keep it there. Just keep it there. You haven't let them in your doors for 75 years. Like, don't stop this practice. And lo and behold, they do come. But it takes a commitment, not just saying, well, we tried it for a season and nobody came, so we're quitting. And that does take financial resources. There are certain, hold on, let me rephrase this. Other theaters I've worked with to design not only sensory inclusive shows, but like you can turn that entire performance into a family show, because being able to move up and down, being able to keep the lights halfway up, like that's not just for our friends that have sensory issues. Like, what if you want to bring your kid to the theater for the first time in an environment that feels a little more relaxed? Everybody wins. Even thinking about your marketing materials for your theater, and do you have your playbill in accessible formats? Do you have a QR code? Do you have large print? Do you use audio description at certain performances? Again, that's another thing. I've worked with a handful of theaters to just build it in. On this night, every month, we have our audio described show. So it takes commitment, but also the disability community has been the most historically left out. And it's going to take some time. So you really have to have that commitment and get out into the community too. It's really important for theaters to support disability organizations, right? Go to their events, hang out, learn, meet the participants at these programs, right? Meet the individuals that are in our community doing disability justice work and see how you can collaborate on something. It can't just be all in your institution. You have to get out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've even in my own life experience with my mother-in-law in a wheelchair and looking at homes recently where we were talking about, we looked at a townhouse and then we were like, we can't live here because mom would never be able to come. And we ended up buying a ranch house because obviously we want our mom to come visit us, and my daughter who does have some sensory sensitivities, and she can't go to any space that has loud anything. So if the church is too loud, we have to leave. If the theater is too loud, we have to leave, So yeah, all of those suggestions. And of course, my experience of, disability coming into my life is very minimal, and which is why I just love your work so much. I love your advocacy work in the theater, and just every single time that you and I have had conversations, my eyes are opened to new possibilities and things that I just hadn't thought of, that I think are really important for listeners to hear, for theater goers to hear, for casting directors to hear, all of it. So right now, what are some kind of common misconceptions about disabilities in the performing arts, and how can we challenge those?
Yeah, I think there's always the misconception that people with disabilities are going to require so much extra time, so much extra money. And for the most part, if you are an actor with a disability pursuing this, you know exactly what you need and how to communicate it. And it just takes an honest conversation of being like, hey, for example, right? If I'm on a national tour and we're in a new space every week, yeah, I need to have my own fun time, that I call it, with the stage manager in a new space. So I know where the boundaries are so I don't fall off the stage, right? I have no depth perception. But I know how to chart my own path. And I think a lot of times people are like, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? And I'm like, well, maybe just set up a conversation and listen, and realize that it's not so challenging. Now, there are certain things that do cost money. I think about shows with ASL that need to hire a director of artistic sign language so that the whole experience can have an ease and a fluidity and a level of support. So yeah, sometimes there is a financial cost. But I think so many folks just completely underestimate what folks and the creativity and the innovation of disabled folks. We have constantly had to figure it out in a world that wasn't designed for us. So I promise you, we're going to be able to figure it out in your process. We're going to actually probably bring some solutions that you might have not even thought of, because that's not your world every day. So I think that's a really big one. It's classic, right? I have a friend who's a tap dancer, who's an amputee, and, he's told me about countless auditions that he goes into, and they just look at him as if he's incapable of anything. And he's like, why would I come in this dance audition if I did not feel completely aware of what my instrument can do and how to adapt? We know our bodies. If we are pursuing this at the professional level, now, yes, there's a lot of different ways we can pursue the arts. But if disabled actors are wanting to do this at a certain level, we have our advocacy and our accommodations and what we need down to a science. We really do. So I think it's not being afraid. There's so much fear around disability because people are so scared they're going to mess up. They're so scared they're going to say something offensive, or especially in the world we're living in today, right? It's just oh my gosh, can we even mess up? And the fact is, yeah, because you tried. I would so much rather people try than back away. Because
or ask as opposed to assume, But asking and listening exactly what you were just saying, of just ask and listen, don't assume
exactly
one way or the other. Yeah. Wow. Have you encountered resistance
Oh yeah.
to more inclusive practices?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's disheartening,
Mm.
but and yes, I literally call myself a cockeyed optimist. Like I have the art of the reframe is like I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's my brain just naturally is like, but what about this? Or on the other hand, like sometimes it's because it's been had to be like that, even if I haven't wanted to. But yeah, I mean, folks, a lot of it's out of fear, and a lot of it
Mm.
is people don't know until they've seen it done. And if they haven't seen it done, like it's so hard that it has to take a risky person or someone who's willing to take a risk and learn and take a leap, which it shouldn't be that way. But um I had a lot of experiences like that in New York where I could very quickly tell you specific casting offices where I was like, this is where I want to be. Like, I want to be in these rooms with these people. Or places where I was like, okay, this didn't feel so good. And I felt like I was more of a burden because I needed accommodations and I don't want to go in rooms where I feel like a burden, you know? So
Mm-hmm.
it also takes a certain level of artistic agency at some point. As an artist with a disability, you have to say, what will I tolerate and what will I not tolerate? Because we put it all in the industry and we it can be very easy to feel victimized by the industry, but also you can find a solution and you can find your corner and your squad. I mean, I definitely had like a handful of folks. I mean, a huge community of folks in New York where I was like, these are my people and these are the rooms I'm going in. And these other ones don't feel so good. So why would I do that? Why would I keep trying if folks aren't there yet? I'd rather go where the folks are going to like be expansive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to
Well, and
plug.
that's what it sounds like being expansive, adding some creativity to the theatrical process that maybe we just haven't even, as you mentioned before, like haven't even thought of.
Mhm.
Where, if someone walks into a room and they're like, this is what I need, and then you are able to provide that expansive space, and then all of a sudden an audience is seeing something in a different way, like how much creativity it can add to the process.
Yeah, just so much. Like I have a secret dream that in every Broadway show, at least in the ensemble, like there is a member of the disability community because that's our world, right? Like that is our world. 25% of us are going to be disabled or are disabled. Um, and think about the innovation, the creativity, the fun, the like ability to learn that could be brought to a cast and ensemble with just one member of the community. It doesn't have to be, I mean, I would love it if it was like five, but how cool if that was something that was like, oh yeah, but of course, like this is going to be such an exciting, great part of our process. And think about the amount of audience members that get to come and see themselves. I didn't meet another actor with low vision until I was 20. What am I now? I'm 32, 31. I was like 26 or 27. I was the only one of me that I knew. I knew of people, but I didn't meet the other woman in the industry who's pursuing it with the same kind of tenacity until I was that old. So,
Mm.
yes, it's beautiful to have role models in the theater, but how cool to have a role model that is like you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So you had mentioned some accessible practices. Do you have
Mhm.
like what are some accessible practices?
Yeah, I mean, a very basic thing that you can do no matter what area of work you're in is if you have any kind of form that folks fill out or, before they work with you or before you go into perfect example. My acting mentor in New York, Jen Waldman, was the first person that ever made the theater space completely accessible without me having to feel like a burden. Uh,
Mm-mm.
and all it took was her having something on her form that said, "Is there anything else you'd like me to know?" And that left me space to ask for the accommodations I needed without feeling like it was too much, because so much of the time we're meant to feel that way. and my good old Southern upbringing makes me feel that way. And I show up for class and all my materials are in a size 24 font and I'm in the front row and I didn't have to ask multiple times. I didn't have to go do it myself. And it's just simply being like, hey, is there anything else you'd like me to know to make your experience better? And that can open the door more than ever. It can also open the door if you can provide certain accommodations to tell people like what you can provide. Like we can provide our materials in different formats. Here is a really amazing description of how to access or how to get to the space. That's a big one for folks with a ton of different disabilities, right? That could be sensory, that could be wheelchair users or folks that use different mobility aids. Okay, great. For me, I need to know what landmarks are near your building so that I don't miss it because I can't read the numbers on the building really without getting out my telescope from my purse. And then I stop traffic in New York because I'm trying to, so saying, hey, you turn here and it's about halfway down the street and it'll be on your whatever hand side and you'll go up 2 flights of stairs. Like even little things like that can make a huge difference just for folks' ease so that whenever they come to your space, be that education, artistic, to get, the amazing care that they get when they come into your space, it allows us to come and our nervous systems be just a little more calm, which is nice because I definitely know as someone with low vision, I mean, my shoulders are in my ears. I'm like, oh my God, I have no peripheral vision. So I sometimes just feel like everything is cutting me off, and so I'm always on alert. And any chance I have a very detailed description of like how to get somewhere, I'm like, oh, thank God. Thank God I can just like move in a way that feels unburdened.
Yeah, so easily providable of directions or, major like claps and snaps to Jen Waldman for having that on her form. It's not a challenge for us to add a question on a form that can help everyone feel included and be able to express what their needs are. That's so important for every space.
Yeah. And, they might not even express them right away, but then they might see it again and be like, okay, now I feel safe enough with this person that I can. That's the hard part too, is I am one person with a disability and I advocate for a living, but I have a lot of friends with disabilities that are like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. I hate it. Actually, it's annoying. It's a pain in my ass. Like and I respect that too, so it's also knowing that it's not a monolith and you might meet a student 4 years after working with them that you find out has a disability because they finally feel like they can actually tell you what they need and be taken care of.
Yeah. I think to hear that it was 25% was a shocking number for me already. There have been many shots. I've literally had to take several breaths to calm my nervous system from hearing some of the things that even you yourself, and also because I adore you. So to hear that you've experienced some of that is very, challenging for my heart. So I have to take a few breaths to calm my nervous system for that. And yeah, I'd love to just take a moment and move into some of the work that you're doing now with arts and medicine and health. So you're working, talk to us a little bit about where you work now and what that work looks like.
Yeah. So I work within that field almost every day of the week. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I have this amazing opportunity to be an artist in residence and the only artist in residence at an eating disorder treatment facility in Birmingham. And that was actually a part of my story as a younger, from when I was about 9 to 25. So to be able to be in that field and provide something good and warm and creative and it's so special to me. But I work in it's a intensive outpatient and partial hospitalization program, and I lead creativity for mental wellness groups. So they're about 2 hours in length, and we do different units. So we'll have like a month or a 6-week long unit. We just finished a ukulele unit, and the
Cool.
yeah. And we learned chords and we sang together and they told me who they wanted. They're like, well, we want to sing from Pink. And I was like, great, I'll get some Pink chords and we'll all learn how to play. We want to do, whoever they're listening to. I work with adolescents and adults, so the range of who we play on the ukulele is pretty intense. It's so fun. And then some weeks we'll do a poetry unit where we are doing that right now, actually, where I have printed song lyrics from about 100 songs line by line, and then I cut them out, and then the girls and women I work with mix them up and create poetry out of song lyrics. And the great thing about the arts and health space in this world is when you are in treatment for any addiction, mental health purpose, your groups are so focused on, you talk about your eating disorder, you talk about coping skills and resources, and every minute of every day is so focused around why you are in treatment, which is your condition or eating disorder in this case. And so what I find is that when folks get to come to creativity for mental wellness group, you don't have to talk about that at all. And actually, you're probably going to be more likely to share things that you wouldn't share maybe in therapy or in other things because you're doing something creative. Your mind isn't necessarily so zeroed in on all of the hard stuff. And then conversation just flows. And I still have to chart as if I am a, physician. I still, but I'm not a physician, but I still have to go into the electronic records and do charting after all of my groups. But what's so fascinating is so many really special moments and breakthroughs can happen in a creativity group where you're responding to a prompt and you're just letting conversation flow that are harder in one-on-one situations or group therapy situations. So I'm there 3 days a week. And then the cool part about arts and health is our focus is to bring arts into the healthcare space, of course, but also to figure out how to bring the arts into a lot of other community and public health spaces that might not have access. And so I teach a class at Samford University called Community Engagement in the Arts, and we learn how to work with community partners. What does that look like? How do we create memorandums of understanding and agreements? And how do we work with students from various populations? And then my students and I get to go into hospitals. We get to go into certain environments and work mostly with young people. But it's so much fun because I feel like I went to a BFA program. My head was down and I was in music theory and Meisner technique and modern dance and doing all the things. But I always had this part of me that knew I wanted to bring the arts to more places. And I never had a class that taught me how to do that. And so it's really fun to get to actually use what I've learned in the field of arts and health to show students that you don't have to be limited to a theater to do what you love.
I want to take this class.
It's so fun.
As soon as you started talking about it, I'm like, can I be a fly on the wall and take this class? When you were mentioning providing the creative space for those that you work with eating disorders, and that you're providing a space where they don't have to come and talk about their disorder, they're able to just be in and of the world around them and the community that's around them, and they are not their disorder. And then just bringing that back to what you had mentioned about, some people, are with a disability are saying, okay, yeah, I have disability. And then others are like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to, be that. I don't want to be seen as that. I want to forget about it. And then bringing that all the way back to what you said at the beginning of, you are not your diagnosis. You're not your diagnosis. You're not your disability. You're not your disorder.
Yeah. Well, Christine, even the kids that I work with, my Songs for Sight kids who have low vision and different eye diseases, we always have an art project as a part of what we do. We have these quarterly meetings, and the quietest, shyest kids that really are like, my parents forced me to come to this, it's amazing how just a creative action invites us to open up. And
Mm-hmm.
I see this in kids as young as kindergarten, I mean, probably younger, but those are the ones that I work with. And we might do something simple like painting a birdhouse, and then maybe an actual challenge that you face because of your disability comes up, and like you have to deal with it in real time, but also you're around people who are creating too, and you're kind of figuring it out. And maybe a challenge doesn't come up, but just the act of doing something and like letting your mind kind of slow down allows you to feel okay to share.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Yeah.
really special.
It's so special. It's incredibly special, and providing those creative spaces. A couple of my colleagues who run Academy of Noise, who are beatboxers,
Yeah.
have talked. They've been on the podcast and talked about how similarly it'd be the shy kid or someone who stutters, and they come in or like with speech disabilities, and they'll come into a space and it's like beatboxing, but then to just be able to create sound and noise and ticks and clucks, and all of a sudden they're able to experience something in a very different way. And they often just mention the beauty of watching that process, of seeing someone kind of start to deshell themselves or
It is
unshell. I don't know where
amazing. No, but
yeah.
it's so true. I see that at the Eating Disorder Center every week. You see the people, like the teens that got sent there by their parents. They don't want to be there. They don't want to recover. They're hardened off and closed off to the world. And then all of a sudden, we're doing this poetry project. I'm playing whoever they want to listen to on my Spotify while we're doing it. And all of a sudden, you see the ice melt. You actually get to experience that with someone in real time. And it's so beautiful to get to be a witness to that. Like I feel like it's such an honor, and I get home at the end of the day and I'm in so much awe of the people that I got to experience, and truly just be the teeniest fly on the wall in what helped them open up today. Just a little bit more.
Mm. So that's so beautiful. So what would you kind of suggest, recommend to us as the listeners of just kind of moving forward in the world of theater and creativity and inclusion, of working, how can we do better? How can we assist? How can we see? How can we listen? What are some of the things that we, as anyone listening, could do? Like, if you could just reach everyone in the world and say, this is how you can
Oh gosh.
be in it, create a space for us.
That's so tricky because, in the
It's different for everyone.
yeah, and in the consulting work I do, sometimes I'll be like, here's a list of resources, and sure, that can be helpful, and I can give you all of these very tangible things like watch this, listen to this podcast, read this book, do this thing. But I actually right now, even in like the personal work I'm doing, I'm realizing that in order to live a creative and sustainable life, I have to slow down. And me sitting here giving, a million ideas, which is, I can talk a mile a minute. So I could easily do that. But I think you have to slow down to even know where the gaps are and what you know and what you don't know. You have to slow down to realize that, hey, maybe for just this week, I could have a creative practice that has nothing attached, that has no outcome attached. Slow down to realize, like, when you're in the middle of a rehearsal, even this morning, I was choreographing a piece for a gala, and I was like, Alie B, you get to do this. Like this is huge. Like this isn't hard. You get to wear shoes that make noise and dance joyfully for a job? Are you kidding? And it very much, I woke up and I was like, I have to choreograph this 3-minute piece and I only have an hour and and it's like, wait a minute. this is fun. Like, this is so fun. And there's so much joy to be had. So I think all of that can be supported by just slowing down, And even after, folks listen to this, I hope you take a minute before you run to your next thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like those two words, every time I hear them said to me, I'm like, you're right. I just need to take a minute and slow down. There was a book I read, Slow Productivity.
Yeah, I'm reading that right now.
You are.
Yes, I love that we're
so good. It's so good.
Yes.
And I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to this, and then I'm like, wait, just pause and slow down.
Well, and truly, I mean, I'd say even the work that I've done with you, and when I was living in New York and going a mile a minute, and I remember first coming to you and I was like, wait, I'm supposed to just be still. Like, I don't even know this life, And so it's such a practice and such a process. And there can be, like, we would love to be slow in both our mind and our body, quite frankly, but one day at a time.
Definitely. But it's always a really good reminder. Sometimes I have fake tattoos that I wear sometimes. And I have one, I always put it right here and it says slow down. And then I can just I'll be like doing something and then I see it and I'm like, slow down.
Okay, the next time I see you, I'm absolutely ordering those and we'll just be like, now, and you'll be like, oh my
God. Yes, we'll both put one on. Yeah. So just really quick before we end, just a couple more questions. The first one is just, are there any kind of organizations that just come off to the top of your head who are doing really great work, really great advocacy work that you kind of say, like, go ahead and check out these organizations. They're doing it right. They're doing a great job. These are ideas, like, you can get it from these organizations.
Totally. Here's some random ones I'm going to throw out. Not random. They're super intentional, but they're all over the country. So Family Theater, but spelled with a PH, PHAMALY in Denver, is doing some really incredible disability focused theater work. And just authentic, just really cool casting. I mean, I saw Chicago there with an entirely disabled cast and it was like so incredible. They just did Chorus Line. They just push the boundaries and show what's possible. I think they're a beautiful theater to study. Also, the Kennedy Center does an amazing conference every year called the LEAD Conference, Leadership Exchange of Arts and Disability. Really, really important stuff. And then you get to meet your little tribe of people doing this across the country, because a lot of us know each other because we're all, trying to do the same thing and we want to support each other. And gosh, I mean, it really depends on where you are in the country. Those are the two I want to really direct people to, just so you can see what's possible if you really go all out. Those are definitely. And then I would say it's really important to be listening and reading and watching from disabled authors and creators, right? So if you haven't, please go watch Crip Camp on Netflix. Read books like Disability Visibility and Being Human, Judy Human's autobiography. She's the mother of the disability rights movement. Like, it's just so important to know what's been done and who's done the work before us so that we can all do it together in a way that is honoring the community that is just now, I feel like, getting some care and attention that we have deserved for years. I mean, y'all, the ADA was literally in 1991. Like, it's crazy that is so recent, in the 90s, that things that the world just began getting somewhat better. So I think it's really important. Look at the books you read, look at the content you listen to. And you can always reach out to me on Instagram. I have so many resources, and I love sharing them.
Yeah, amazing. And I want to get into that in just a second. But before the last question, before we kind of see like how do we get in touch with you? You did a documentary.
Yes, you can watch that too.
Do you want to tell us about the documentary and where people could check that out?
Sure. Yes. So when I was in the city, this was in right before the great shutdown. It's called Able. It is a series and it is available. Actually, it's on YouTube now. We were on Amazon Prime, but then we realized, what are we doing? We don't need to, like, this is for the world. This isn't for us. We're not trying to, make a fortune off of this documentary. We need people to see this so that they do better. Like that, and understand and have a little bit more empathy and curiosity. So it is on YouTube. It is an 8-episode miniseries. The episodes are really, most of them under 20 minutes because we want to make sure that people have things that stick with them. And you meet 8 folks that work in theater, TV, film, stand-up comedy that are all disabled. And you just get such a range of perspectives, again, reminding us that A, disability isn't a monolith, but B, like, look at all of this amazing work being done and look at these humans you can support and learn from. So definitely check that out. It's mainly focused on the arts and entertainment world, but I think anyone could learn a little bit from it.
Yeah, great. So listeners, please check out Able on YouTube. And so if anyone would like to get in touch with you, learn more about you, you mentioned your Instagram. Where can they find that?
Yes, my handle is at ALIEBG, Alie BG. I only spell Alie with one L. And you can also find me on my website, aliebgorrie.com. Reaching out on Instagram is the quickest way to reach out to me, or shoot me an email. All that info is on my website too. And I would love to connect, especially if you are looking for someone to help or lead a workshop, or you're a leader of an arts organization or an educational organization and just want an opportunity for your folks to learn about disability. I would love to meet you and get to know you.
Connect. Yeah. So please go ahead and reach out to Alie B. Alie B, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. I know we've talked about it for a while. I think it's such an incredibly important conversation to have and to keep going. So thanks for hopping on and joining me.
Oh, you're the best. Thank you.
Thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, tell your colleagues, students, and friends. Subscribe, rate, and please write a review. You can find us on Instagram or Facebook, and feel free to check out my website at www.thevisceralvoice.com for information on programs and upcoming events. I hope you join us next time for another wonderful conversation on The Visceral Voice.